Bitcoin mining can be very profitable. If you're not changing, you're dying. If you want to be really successful, create something new and pleasingly different.
I'd like to introduce Sir Jean Massey with MediaShares. Sir, there's just so much to cover about you and a lot on you, so I'd like you to just introduce yourself to the audience and just tell us what work you're involved with.
Well, I actually started in the late 1990s, around 1998. I began telling everyone that all the funding is going to be on the internet. I called it fan financing, and I actually created a way to finance movies on the internet and received a US issued business method patent for financing movies on the internet. And for many years, I ran around telling everybody that all the financing was going to be on the internet. And then in 2006, Kickstarter came out and called it, instead of fan financing, they called it crowdfunding. And I began to be a speaker on Wall Street because I was knowledgeable in this area. And over the years, I've become recognized as a thought leader in crowdfunding, and primarily MediaShares, my company, specializes in consulting companies that want to get funding through online capital raises.
Okay,
we specialize this.
I just would like to ask, what about your approach when it comes to international companies, startup companies? Is MediaShares open to that, and what approach would you use when funding them?
You see, in the US, we are highly regulated with capital raises. And so if you want to raise any money in the US or from US investors, for example, even if you have a company in Russia or Dubai or Singapore, anywhere else in the world, and you want to approach US investors, you have to register here or be subject to some sort of legal exemption from the SEC rules. So it's not easy for someone in another country to raise money from US investors. They have to abide by US laws. You cannot market to the US investor market without being subject to those laws.
So have you ever considered, because you work with IPOs, but I was just thinking about what's your thought when it comes to cryptocurrency, or maybe as an alternative to an IPO security token offerings? Would you see that as an option?
I'm very familiar with STOs, and I have actually a cryptocurrency client who makes a wallet, a very secure wallet for cryptocurrencies. And we've traveled all around to all the different blockchain and cryptocurrency conferences. And in the course of that, I saw a number of people raising money online with cryptocurrency offerings, ICOs, STOs. They, as long as they don't address US investors, they can do anything they want. They, of course, are subject to whatever rules of whatever country they're located. But if you want to sell your STO or your ICO to US investors, you must be subject to our laws here.
I understand.
A number of companies have been, Telegram and T0 and all the different companies that have done STOs. Some of them have gotten in trouble with the SEC here, even though their offering was overseas, and some of them did it, in the Bahamas, or they call it offshore.
Canary Islands, free economic zones.
They've tried those offerings in other countries to avoid the laws here, and yet they address US investors, and so they're subject to the SEC rules. And even though they're in other countries, many times the SEC has come down on companies that have tried to raise money here, even though they're in Malta or something, they still get in trouble here if they try to raise, if they accept any money from U.S. investors, then they can get in trouble if they don't abide by the rules.
So,
now, an STO.
I'm okay. Carry on. I'll ask it later.
An STO can be done here if you use an exemption called Regulation D, which allows you to only take money from accredited investors.
Yes.
And that's how STOs are being done here. And they are being done now here in the US. STOs are being done. They're being done for real estate, a number of things. They call them token offerings.
Utility tokens.
And so, well, actually, they're security tokens, but they're exempt under Regulation D. And there was one company that even did an IPO using an STO under Regulation A. And it was very complicated. I think they spent $1 million in legal fees trying to get it passed. So it is possible here to do that, but it's very expensive to abide by all the rules. And you must abide by the rules even if you're based in another country.
I was interested in knowing why this process of a company filing for IPOs, why is there so much confidentiality surrounded by it? And with regards to the SEC, why is there that quiet period? Why is it necessary?
The reason there is something called a quiet period, it's also called gun jumping, from jump the gun. And so what they don't want you to do
sounds dangerous
until you have filed with the SEC and until the SEC has blessed your offering, they don't want you to go around and talk to investors. You have to be quiet about it. Now,
how is that fair though? Because I mean, if we're a startup company, and you'd also like to also not have all your eggs in one basket. Not everyone has 500,000 just ready to pay for a process that's going to take 6 months, I guess. So wouldn't it be fair? Because I mean, a more liberal approach to let companies and startup companies.
I don't like it, first of all, to have to be quiet, but here's why they do it. Let's suppose that I'm an investor and you tell me a few sentences about your offering. So I've got this fabulous thing, we're going to make a lot of money, and we're going to make so much money you won't even be able to count it. And so give me $100 grand and here's our investment. And I give you $100 grand. And then I find out later that you have felonies and you've been arrested, and that you really don't have any revenues, and that you really are misrepresenting your offering. You haven't told me all the facts.
That's why blockchain. That's why we use blockchain, because it's transparent.
Well, if you do tell everyone all about your offering, you file it legally with the SEC. Yes. And so when you file it legally with the SEC and you basically be very open about your offering and tell the truth and know all about it, who's involved, how much have you made in the past, what's the deal, and the SEC blesses that, then you can do your offering no problem. What they don't want you to do is to be secretive and not tell everybody that you haven't made any money and that you really don't know what you're doing and you've never done this before. They want to know all the facts before you take an investor's money. So they're protecting investors is what the rules are for.
I understand. So does MediaShare make use of any blockchain technology methods in their ways of doing business now?
We haven't yet, and here's why. In the U.S., we work mostly with stocks and mostly investments on platforms like Start Engine, Seed Invest. These platforms are sanctioned by the SEC and they abide by very strict rules. So the reason we haven't done, we have one client that's doing a token offering, but it's under Regulation D, so it's blessed by the SEC. We have another client that wants to raise money through an STO, but has not yet because it's very complicated to pass the rules here. To be accepted by the SEC as a token offering or an STO or an ICO, it's very complicated. here in the US to abide by the rules.
And why is it only the SES? Are there any other organizations alternative to doing the same sort of
No, it's the SEC.
structure?
Well, the SEC is the Securities Exchange Commission.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's governmental, right?
it's a government regulatory body that governs all capital raises. It's a lot like if in the US, if you want to sell real estate, you have to be a real estate broker and you have to be licensed. And it's the same with capital raising. If you want to raise capital here, you have to be licensed. They want to know you're telling people you're raising capital. Well, you have to be under FINRA rules, which are FINRA is a regulatory body that enforces SEC rules. FINRA, FINRA, is the Financial Industry National Regulatory Authority, I think is what that stands for. And they are very strict. They want to make sure that investors don't lose their money, or investors are not lied to or misrepresent. The capital raising is not misrepresenting and telling a bunch of stories. So it's very strict.
I understand.
So people don't lose their money.
With the rise of Bitcoin, with encryption, I guess that investors can have another option just to make sure that, they aren't taxed, or just put them in a position, because as you see right now, Bitcoin's price is rising just before the coiling. So don't you think that it's also an option? Would you be open to the idea of, incorporating Bitcoin?
Well, I've worked as a consultant for a Russian company that was raising capital. And so I'm very much in favor of any method to raise capital, provided it abides by the rules.
Rules, exactly. But every country has its own rules and regulations.
That's right. That's right. And so everywhere you want to sell your offering, you've got to abide by that country's rules.
Yes. And what is your idea on Bitcoin mining, cloud mining? What do you think of it? Do you think it's also an option to raise?
One of my clients is a Bitcoin miner, and they have a special deal with people where they can invest in mining and make 30% on their money. So it can be very profitable. Bitcoin mining can be very profitable. It has to the price of Bitcoin has to be high enough to make it profitable. If Bitcoin goes down to $3,000, it's not profitable to mine Bitcoin. So Bitcoin needs to be, several $1,000s more. From what I've heard, it costs about $4,000 to mine a Bitcoin.
You have different options. You have either you're going to buy your own ASIC hardware, or you can decide to go into cloud mining. But it's not really that expensive. Like, we have one of the best, cheapest, lowest products on the market, and return of investment of 283% when it comes to cloud mining. But if you're interested in those details, we're the best on the market right now. But I'll give that to you.
You must have cheap electricity.
Yeah, it's almost free.
Because that's the issue here. If you try to do it in the US, you've got to pay for the electricity.
Yes. And also it's a free economic zone, so there's no tax on any of our clients' earnings. So I think that's a really good deal. And we're right next to a power plant. Just a little bit of information on us. Okay, but I'd like to know from you. MediaShare fundings consist of creative projects, sports teams, movie industry, even a presidential campaign. So I just wanted to know, after this whole COVID-19 situation, how has it affected the company, and what are your objectives in moving forward and solving these issues?
Online funding has actually increased because of the COVID. More people are investing now because more people are online. Before, people were going to work, and now they're all sitting at home in front of a computer, and most of the platforms that do online funding are actually having their best months ever. So the COVID is actually helping investments online. Now, venture capital and private equity is another story. Venture capital is not doing as well, and private equity is not doing as well. But online crowdfunding is doing better than ever, actually.
So also I just wanted to ask, IPOs don't necessarily mean that they are transparent. You also can get um, funding from individual clients. It's the public. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's always going to be certification from where the funds are gathered. So how do you go about that? I would like to know.
Anytime you take money from an investor, unless it's your father or something, and anytime you take money from an investor in the US, you have to register under Regulation D. You have to tell the SEC, I took money from this person and I'm taking more from other people. You
So
have to
you register
register
every single person that wants to crowdfund IPOs, has to
yes.
every individual entity. I'm not talking about companies. I'm talking about the people, individual.
Every person that you take money from, whether it's under Regulation D or Regulation A or any kind of taking funding from anyone, has to be under some sort of SEC rule.
Uh-huh. And
You can't take money otherwise.
I
And so,
understand.
and that's probably why blockchain and cryptocurrencies and STOs and everything are not doing well here, because they realize they've got the same problems that you would pay in a regular IPO. You've got to abide by the same rules. So there's
Okay.
really not much of an advantage of doing an
Yes.
STO over a regular IPO.
I don't know, sir. I think STOs are maybe just a better chance. For instance, African governments, because you know that we're just trying to escape corruption, and we're
Hmm.
just so this is an option to transfer funds, because if there's always somebody that what do we call it? There's somebody who will control the accessibility and the STO, the people or the governmental organizations that are involved in this, and
Hmm.
and everybody can see the transactions because it's all on blockchain, and every transaction can be traced. So I think this can be looked as an option. Yes, there's a lot of regulation, I understand, but I think this is a more democratic approach. For maybe you could say for third world countries, this is actually quite a good solution, because despite the fact that there's regulation, despite the fact that the government also does pay attention to, you know, all the funding and what's being done internally, there's still some places where not you can't trace the money. It's still missing somehow. So I think that's my personal opinion, and obviously
I
you're
agree. I
yeah.
agree. And I'll tell you why I agree. Because in many countries in Africa, in Zimbabwe, and even in Zambia, which has a very good system, there is huge inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And the money system in Africa is in trouble in many countries. And so if you have a currency, and for example, I know in Zimbabwe, they are using Bitcoin in some cases to transfer funds, and that's a big help,
Mm-hmm.
because money situation in some African countries is not great. And by doing it on the blockchain and by using Bitcoin, you can transfer money better.
Mm-hmm. And also, if you compare this, because we're always compared to the dollar standard, and you know, we're not liquid, because every time we make transactions, we have to pay to, you know, as I said, a banker in New York, for instance, there's commission. So
Well, you
okay.
still have to do that with Bitcoin. How do you turn it into currency? How do you turn it into fiat currency?
Well, um, I don't think it's necessary, because we have applications. There's places actually here where I'm living right now where I can just pick it with my phone and pay. You don't
Hmm.
necessarily need to change it into dollars. Just make sure that it's
Okay.
encrypted. That's about it.
Uh-huh.
But and there's also like countries like Switzerland, like Armenia. They're trying to incorporate the whole crypto community and
Sure.
infrastructure, so that like literally we don't need fiat currency, or even the gold standard
Okay.
also isn't. How can I say?
Hmm.
It's quite volatile as well itself. It's controlled, right?
I agree.
What
But
about the fact that, okay, when it comes to investing in companies, so MediaShare would own about 50% of those shares, right?
no, we work by the hour. Usually we don't take a percentage of the company. We help a company find funding and they pay us just like a worker. they pay us normally by the
50%
hour.
of the dividends that they earn?
No, we don't take a percentage. In the U.S., it's illegal to take a percentage of the capital raise unless you're a broker. We're not a broker. We're just consultants.
And what is an underwriter?
We work by the hour. An underwriter is someone that guarantees an offering. If you go to a brokerage and they underwrite your deal, let's say you're trying to raise 10 million and they underwrite the deal, they guarantee you're going to get $10 million. And they go out to their investors and then they give you the $10 million and they take a percentage of that because they're a broker. But we're not brokers. We're just hired hands, basically. We're a consulting firm that you pay us by the hour, and we help you market your deal, and we introduce you to brokers and lawyers and accountants and help you put your deal together.
Does your company consist of millennials? What percentage of millennials are in the company?
None. We're all old people. I'm 71. And most of the people that work with us are old. So
are you excited about introducing young people into the company and showing them?
We love young people. Absolutely.
And would you be prepared to change a few strategies, or would you stick to what's been working all along?
I think if you're not changing, you're dying. You have to constantly change to keep up with. And even better than changing is to lead and come up with new ideas that are better. Mm-hmm. And for usually you don't see that with old people, but I'm personally interested in change and the next new thing. I worked with Ely Callaway with Callaway Golf for many years, and I'll never forget one time he said, if you want to be really successful, create something new and pleasingly different. Mm-hmm. So we're always interested in something new, a new way to do something or a better way to do something. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, most startups have a new or better way to do something.
Yeah.
Okay,
sir. Well, I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity. It was very informative.
Thank you for the opportunity. So very nice to meet you, Jasmine.
Nice to meet you, sir.
I hope your successful broadcast is good, and I'll be glad to talk to you at any time.
All right, sir.
You take good care, okay?
You too.
All right, my dear. You have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.